In the previous video, I introduced the study cards project and gave you the interface to design. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but my form is 800 by 600. Although you could do this a different size. So we had a bunch of labels that we created. Another label down here, a couple radio buttons. Then we have some buttons over here on the right-hand side to open up our study cards, randomly shuffle the dictionary, clear and start back from the beginning, keep track of our score as we mark cards correct or incorrect, and then we can review the incorrect. And then there's a button here to create a new data file or to edit a data file that's been saved. And we're going to do that in phase 2. I showed you in the previous video there is also a panel, and I have my panel down here out of the way, but this was the panel that we'll create in phase 2 to be able to edit and create a new topic file. And it's going to have some text boxes, some labels, a list, and some buttons. And again, I'm just going to move that panel out of the way. By the way, the visible property of that panel is set initially to false. When we start our program, we don't see it. And it only shows up when we click the Create Edit button. All the Create Edit button does is set the visibility of the panel to true and specifies the location for the upper left-hand corner in case we forget to move it back in place. By the way, I forgot to mention we also have this huge label here which has the auto size set to false. In case you're curious, I set the size of this label to be 622 by 394. You could change that to 620 by 395, whatever. I just kind of eyeballed it. And there's another little label back here that's basically the label the same size. I put it behind it and set the fill color or the back color to gray. It's a little bit darker gray than my form to give it that drop shadow effect. It contains no text, it's not named, it's just there for aesthetic purposes. And then the font I'm using for the big label is Microsoft Sans Serif Bold 28 point. From the previous buttons I did change this to say open a study cards file to begin, and I changed my button up here to open a study cards file because I changed the name of the project from flashcards to study cards. All right, let's take a look at the Open Study Cards file. Oh, by the way, there's also an open file dialog that I named OFD Open Flash Card File. Let me pull the properties over here for that. So the OFD Open Flash Card File, that's the name of it. My file name is star.txt, and then for the filter, I have two pairs. Text files as star.txt, and then my star.txt notation that will list all the files that are txt, and then the all files, star.star, and the notation of star.star. We also have a save study cards. So SFD save study cards, that's a save file dialog. And pretty much the same thing, except I specified text UTF-8, and then also have all files, which I notice I misspelled here, so I'm going to fix that. All files star.star and star.star, and I'm missing my parenthesis here. Okay, so I don't think I had you set up those two file dialogues in the previous video, so go ahead and set those up. We'll use the open flash card file in opening our study cards, and we will use the save study cards dialog when we create and edit. All right, I'm going to pull my properties back over and dock it down here at the bottom right. Let's take a look at the Open Study Cards button. I'm going to double click on it, see the code. And first thing at the top of our file, we're working with Form 1, and I put some copyright information up here and why I've created this project. There may be more efficient ways to code this. My focus here, though, is to show you the use of a dictionary along with a list and a stack. So my class level variables I set up at the very top, and we have a dictionary named Master Dictionary. That's going to be the data we read in when we open up a file. I have another dictionary named New Dictionary. We're going to use that as we create a new data file. So that's going to be in the second phase. I have a list called entries, which is going to keep track of the cards we want to show to the user. This is going to be the keys coming from the master dictionary, or the keys coming from the cards that have been marked as wrong. So I have another list named wrong list, which will be used to track the cards which were marked incorrect by the user, so we can review just those cards. The data that's being read in from our data file, the data file is going to be stored as data file. That way I can easily write back out to it if we edit it. So I'm going to store that as a class level variable. And then the data that's being read in is, the first line is the topic and the author. So I'm going to store those as class level. The information about side A and side B could be key value, could be term definition, might be Spanish, English. I'm going to store those in two variables of side A and side B, which I initially set to just side A and side B. The total cards that have been read in from our data file, we're going to keep track of whether we're showing side A or side B with a Boolean expression. So that's named showing side A. We're going to keep track of the current card. We're going to set it to 0 to begin with. The number correct and the number incorrect, as they mark a card as correct or incorrect. When we go to edit our files, I want to keep track of whether the most recent changes have been saved or not. And that's again going to be a Boolean expression named last saved. I set it to true initially. And then I have two string values that are set to public called new key and new value. And these are going to be used in getting information from another form that we're going to add in our new pairs. And we'll do that in phase 2. But I'd go ahead and create all these variables. Some of these may not be used right away, but they will all be used eventually. We have our initialize component method in the form 1 constructor. And then here is our method for the opening the data file, the Open Study Files button. I'm going to open up the OFD Open Flashcard file with a show dialog. And then the file name that is chosen is going to go into my data file. Remember, that was a class level variable. I'm going to create a very small array called pairs, because everything in that data file is in pairs. And as we read in that data file, we're going to split it to go in our pairs array. I'm going to set the delimiter as a tab character. Now I created this so that we can open up comma delimited files or tab delimited files. I want to keep track of the extension from our data file as being the last 3 characters. So I'm going to take the data file and do the substring of data file.length -4. It's actually going to be the dot in 3 characters. So if it is a .csv, then I know that I need to change that delimiter to a comma. And I do that with this little conditional structure. Otherwise, it's going to be a tab delimited file as a .txt. My LBL card, that's that big card in the center, that big cream colored card, is going to say please wait, retrieving data. So I'm going to use that just to provide some information. And then in a try, we're going to open up our data file with a stream reader named SR. We're going to open up the file as open text. And the text we're opening is that data file class level variable. I'm going to read in a line, and I'm going to split it using the delimiter. Might be a comma, might be a tab. Either way, I'm going to split it into my pairs array. That first line contains the topic and the author. So pairs sub 0 is going to go into my topic class level. Pairs sub 1, that's the second item in that line, goes into the author class level variable. I'm going to read the next line. The second line contains information about what is side A and what is side B. So I'm going to split that again with a delimiter, and pairs sub 0 goes into side A, pairs sub 1 goes into side B. I'm going to use those two values, side A and side B, in modifying the radio button text, and also in displaying what the current side that's being shown. Total cards. Let me read in from my data. These are the next lines from the data file that represent the data, starting with 0. I'm going to clear my master dictionary in case I'm reading in a new file from having used a file previously. I'm going to clear entries, I'm going to read in my data one line at a time, so I'm doing it while there's still data. So while sr.peak does not equal -1, we're going to read in one line at a time. We're going to split it based on the delimiter. And the delimiter basically is going to be side A and side B. We're going to put that back into our pairs array. And so if pair sub 0.trim does not equal nothing, in other words, in case there's a blank line at the end, I'm not going to add that in. So I'm only going to add if the key is not blank. Assuming that the key, that first item of our pair, is not blank, we're going to add to master dictionary pairs sub 0 and pairs sub 1. We're going to add to entries pairs sub 0. So the entries are only going to have the keys, and we'll use the entries to retrieve the value from the master dictionary. I'm going to increment total cards. So that's going to give me a line on how many cards were there in this file. Once I've done that, I'm going to close my data file. And then I'm going to populate some of the information up here, such as my current topic, the number of items, the author. We'll change our radio buttons a little bit. So LBL current topic.text equals topic, LBL author.text equals literal string cards created by with a space, and concatenating the author name. LBL position.text is card 1. We're going to start with the very first card of the total cards.toString. My radio button, rbStartA.text, is going to say start with side A. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put what that side A information was. Maybe it's Spanish. rbStartB.text, same thing. Side B here might be English. I'm going to set the current card to 0. I'm going to use current card to keep track of which card I'm looking at from my entries. And then I'm going to show the new card as the current card. So I'm calling a method here called showNewCard. We'll look at that in a minute. And I want to do that in case they want it to start with side B instead of side A. This is going to handle whether it's going to show side A or side B. Now I set a bunch of the buttons, all of these buttons, my random shuffle, my clear start, my review the incorrect, the create, not the create edit, but the flip, the mark current and mark incorrect, all as being enabled set to false in the properties. In other words, I didn't want the user to be able to click on those 6 buttons until they opened a data file. That would help reduce potential errors. So I need to enable those buttons now that I've successfully loaded the data file. So I'm going to set those buttons with the enabled property set to true, all 6 of those. I have a catch in case something goes wrong, maybe the data file is corrupt, there's something wrong with my code, although I've tested this in several different data files. So if something did go wrong, we'll show a message box with the message of the exception and a title of something went wrong reading the data file. Now we have this one method here of showNextCard, and that's my next routine here, my next method. I like to separate my methods just with a comment of a bunch of asterisks. Just makes it a little more readable. Things don't blend together quite as much. And so here's my showNextCard. Notice I'm passing it an integer value. Current card was an integer value of 0. And so I'm going to take int and the IDX. This is going to be the IDX of the entries list. So if rbStartA.checked, if I want to start showing side A, I'm going to call showCardA and pass it the index, the IDX. Otherwise, I'll show card B and pass it the IDX. And then I'm going to set the position text to whatever that current card is. It's going to start with 0, but I want to add 1 to it. Remember, our users generally don't start counting with 0, they start counting with 1. So whatever the current card index is, I'm going to add 1 to it, convert that to a string, concatenate of, and then show them the total number of cards. Okay, so here's our showCardA and showCardB methods. So showCardA, I'm going to set the back color to color.ivory, kind of a little cream color. And then I added a try catch here, and I did this because if we click those radio buttons before we load the data, you get an error because there's nothing in entries. And IDX at that point is outside of the bounds. So I did this as a try-catch, meaning if they haven't loaded data yet, yes, it's going to generate an error, but we're going to catch it and let the program keep running. Do nothing. I'm going to change the LBL side.text to say side A, and then whatever the value of side A is, maybe it's Spanish, maybe it's English, maybe it's term, maybe it's definition, and then showing side A is set to true. If, however, they want to look at side B first, we have the show card B method. So it doesn't do anything, so it's a void return. Basically the exact same thing as show card A, except I'm going to set the color to color.aliceblue, a nice little light blue. My LBL card.text, though, instead of equaling entries.idx, we're going to take the entries.idx and use that as our key to pull the value from master dictionary. We want to show that flip side of the card, that column B, where the value of our master dictionary. Again, if we haven't loaded any data in, I'm going to handle this in a try-catch and do nothing. And then our LBL side text property is going to be side B dash and whatever the value of side B is. And then showing side A will be set to false. And I use that showing side A then in our flip button. So here's our flip button. And all we're doing here is if showing side A, I want to show card B. Otherwise, I want to show card A. So we're going to reference those two methods again here that allows us just to flip the cards back and forth. So it serves as a toggle. Okay, so I'm just at this point that you kind of pause the video, go back and rewind, and begin entering this code, assuming you've already done the class level variables. I'm going to pause here for just a few seconds so you can pause the video, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of that code. Actually, I'm going to scroll down a little bit further so you can see the show new card, the show card A and card B, and then double click on the flip button and enter the code for that button. Okay, moving on. I'm going to double click on my random shuffle button. So here's the code for random shuffle. Right here we're going to use a stack to reorder the entries. I could have used a queue, I could have done it some other ways, but I wanted to demonstrate using a stack. So I have a stack called shuffled. It contains a string. And I have a variable called entry, which is nothing. I'm going to use a random number generator, RND random. I'm going to set an integer value called idx to 0. And again, I think I'd planned to do something with that, which I don't believe I ever did. Oh yes, I did. I used it down here. So I set idx to 0. I'm going to reset all my entries to the normal. So in case we have looked at the wrong or the incorrect list, I got an error when I came back to shuffle because that entries list had been redefined to just be the cards that they marked incorrect. So I'm going to clear entries, and then I'm going to resupply entries with all of the keys from the master dictionary structure. And that's what that little loop does, that for each loop. Then I have another loop here, a for loop. And my for loop is going to go through the master dictionary with an integer count from 0 to however many there are, or one less than that. And I'm going to have a little do while loop here in which I'm going to randomly generate a number between that 0 and the count of master dictionary. That's going to go into IDX. And then I want to pull the entries, or set the entry string to be entries sub IDX. And then while shuffled contains the entry. So if I've already used that entry, that key, I don't want to add it to my dictionary, or to my stack in this case. Shuffled is our stack. So if that stack contains that entry, I want to regenerate another number. And this is going to allow me to generate all the numbers between 0 and the count of the master dictionary, and using each one once. Assuming that it does not contain the entry, then I'm going to push that entry onto my shuffled stack. And my stack then just becomes a random order of all of the keys from the master dictionary. Now I want to reorder the entries based on that shuffled order. So I have another little for loop here where I'm taking value from 0 again to the master dictionary count, and entries sub I is going to equal shuffled.pop. Now remember, when we pop, it takes for a stack, it takes the last item in, pops it off the top, removes it from shuffled or from the stack. In this case, it's going into entry sub I. Eventually, we will have gone through all the items in shuffled and written them to our entries. I'm going to set my total cards to entries.count. That should be the same value that it was earlier when we opened the data file. My current card is going to be 0. Reset the correct and incorrect. I'm going to update the score, which modifies the information here. We call that both every time we click mark correct or mark incorrect, or clear restart, or random shuffle, or open a new data file. And we'll look at that method in a minute. And then show new card. I'm going to pass it the current card, which is going to start out as 0. So I'm going to take that first entry that's been shuffled and begin to show my cards from there throughout the stack. The clear start button. Private void btn clear start _ click. I'm going to take a message box, and I just showed that this is going to restart the unshuffled open data. So if they've shuffled, it's going to be back in the original order. Set correct and incorrect but to 0. Set the current card to 0. I'm going to clear the entries. And then for each item in my master dictionary, we can use a for each loop here to add the entry from that dictionary. That's going to reset my entries back to the original data file when we opened it. Set the total cards back to entries.count. I'm going to clear the wrong lists since they're starting back over, and show the new card, which is going to be card 0. If they want to shuffle it at this point, they can click the shuffle button. So let's look at the mark correct and incorrect. After they flip the cards, they can mark it correct or incorrect, or if they're really confident they know the answer, they could just mark it correct, or if they don't know, they can mark it incorrect without flipping. Let's take a look at the mark correct button. So the mark correct button adds or increments the correct classable variable by 1, updates the score, and if they're reviewing the wrong list, so they're going through the items that they marked incorrect, if wrong list contains that entry, entries index current card, I'm going to remove it from wrong list. So let's say they marked 10 wrong and they're going back through those 10 and they find 3 that they've answered or they clicked on correct. Those 3 will be removed, and now they can go back through those 7 that they marked incorrect the second time. And I'm going to show next card. So once they click correct and once they click incorrect, I simply show the next card. And in showing the next card, I'm going to increment current card. And if they've reached the end of the stack, then we're going to show a message box saying they've gone through all the cards. And I'm going to decrement current card by 1 in case they flip the card or try to add it to the correct or incorrect. It's not going to generate an error. Otherwise, assuming they're not at the very end, we're going to show the next card as current, or show new card as current card. So we'll be careful here because I have show next card and I have show new card. They're very similar in nature. One takes an integer, one does not. And this one, the next card, calls the new card. Okay, the button the btn incorrect _ click is almost the same thing as the correct. We're going to increment incorrect. We're going to update the score. If the wrong list does not contain the item. Well, we want to add it one time, so if they double click that or something, notice the little not operator there, make sure you include that. Wrong list contains entries index current card. I'm going to add it to wrong list. Okay, and that wrong list again is used to review the incorrect cards. Otherwise, we won't do that. So it's already in that list. For example, they're going through an incorrect list and it already contains that word. They're marking it incorrect a second time. I don't need to add it a second time. And then we'll show the next card. Here's my update score. And I'm going to continue my practice here of putting in my line of comments between my methods. So update score simply marks LBL correct.text equal to correct. And correct.toString. LBL incorrect.text equals incorrect. These have a colon and a space, and then concatenating incorrect.toString. That'll keep track of the score. And then we have our reviewing the incorrect cards. So I'm going to double click on that. And here, if wrong list has no cards in it, we don't need to do anything. In fact, I've got an if structure here. We'll come back and look at the true fork. But there is an else. And so the else simply says, with the message box, there are no incorrect cards left to review. Okay. So let's take a look at the true fork here. I'm going to bring up a message box. Do you want to shuffle the incorrect cards? So they can go through them as is. We give a message box buttons of yes, no, cancel. And I'm going to take whatever button they click going into dialog result DR. And if DR is yes, they want to shuffle, then we're going to shuffle those. Otherwise, we'd skip down to here. So let's assume they say, yes, I want to shuffle. So I created a list called new wrong. It's a string value. I'm going to use a random number generator again. And while wrong list.count is greater than 0, I am going to generate a new integer of I using RND next in the count of wrong list. New wrong.add is going to add in the wrong list sub I, and then I'm going to remove the element I from wrong list. So eventually this wrong list.count comes down to 0. And that's how in this case I make sure I'm basically reordering the wrong list into this list called new wrong. Now I'm going to use that wrong list down here. So if they didn't shuffle, I'm going to use wrong list. So in that case, I need to clear wrong list, should already be emptied. And then for each string in new wrong, I'm going to add it back to wrong list. So whether they shuffle or don't shuffle, we're going to use wrong list as our list of cards to look at. I'm going to clear my entries. I'm going to set total cards equal to wrong list.count. So maybe they marked 12 cards as incorrect. We're going to look at just those 12 cards. And then I'm going to add wrong list back to my entries. I'm going to clear wrong list so that I can use that wrong list again as they mark cards a second time. Set the correct equals 0, the incorrect to 0. I'm going to update the score, set the current card equals 0, and then I'm going to show the new card as current card. And now we're going to look at just the cards they marked as incorrect. As you see, this is a fairly big project, and it became a little more of a life of its own as I started thinking about how I want to do other things. Like I wanted to be able to shuffle the cards. I hadn't originally planned to do that. I wanted to be able to edit and create new data files from this program. Designing this so that a student can create their own data files to review information for a class. So one last button here is the create edit. And again, I created a panel. So you might just want to, at this point, just create that panel. And I named the panel PNL Edit. PNL Edit, capital E. And then I added the buttons and the text boxes and the list box into that panel. There's also a little button here to close the panel. We'll come back and look at those in phase 2. But if you create the panel here, and I'd go ahead and create this little close button. So I just did a small button with a background of red, a white X. I named it BTN Hide Edit. And the code for that is simply going to be if not last saved. So if they've made changes and they didn't save it, I want to make sure they have a chance to change those. And I use the dialog box to do that. And the dialog box shows a prompt of you've not saved the most recent changes, a new line character. Changes will be lost if you do not first save the file. And then a new line character, are you sure you want to close this now? My title for that message box is unsaved data, continue question mark, message box buttons, yes, no, cancel. The result of what they click on goes into dialog result DR. If DR equals yes, they're agreeing to close the file without saving, then I'm going to set PNL edit.visible to false. If they haven't made any changes since it was last saved, then I'm going to set else, or my false fork of else, to PNL edit.visible also equals false. So if you create that panel, create that one button, and then you can click on your panel, grab the little move button and move it out of the way, and then look at our create edit button. And our create edit button, btn edit, simply sets the current file.text equal to data file. Remember, these are labels and text boxes inside that panel that we're going to create in phase 2. So you might want to come back and add this in later, but here's what you could do just right now in this button is set PNL edit.location equals new point, and I use 10, 10 based on the size of my panel. You can adjust those numbers. So it's going to be the X location, the Y location, and then set the visibility to true. So that way, if I forget to move this back up into place, well, when I click the create edit, by the way, the panel is also set the visibility to false, visible equals false in the properties box when I created that panel, so it doesn't show up. But when I click that create edit button, if that panel is still down here, it'll move it up here and then show it. So that's phase 1. Go ahead and create all that. You can test all of this without doing the create edit, and then we'll do that as phase 2 in the next video.